right, so that moves us into presentations. Our Excellent Academics is next. Dr. Williams.
Yes, we are pleased to welcome this evening a group from Tabb High School. They're going to be sharing information with us about the Cold War project. And Tabb High School students have been working with the Virginia War Museum to create a virtual exhibit of the Cold War. Their wiki pages will be linked to QR codes that will be embedded in a physical display at the museum. And each wiki page will have a link to a student-created podcast connecting their event locally. So this evening we're going to hear from teacher Linnea Turndrup as well as several students whom she'll introduce. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My students and I are pleased to share with you our Cold War project. And I wanted to begin by sharing just a little bit of why I chose the Cold War, because it actually had some angst for me at the beginning. I was concerned about choosing a topic so late in the curriculum as tests loom in May. But I decided the lessons that I hoped my students would learn would outweigh that potential conflict. I wanted my students to have a meaningful foundation in the Cold War in light of recent current events as they continue to unfold. So I was hoping by having a meaningful interaction in this content, they would have a better idea of what's going on in the world around them. So a big part of transformative learning in York County, as well as project-based learning, is having an audience beyond the classroom. And I wanted my students to have an authentic public audience in order to make their work more meaningful and to give them something to work towards. So I connected with the Virginia War Museum, which is a gem tucked away in Newport News that has exhibits from pre-Revolutionary era through the Cold War. And they also have a commitment not only to preserving history, but to promoting education within the community. And I felt as though those goals matched pretty well with what I wanted my students to experience. So I connected with Mr. Chris Garcia, who is the education director there. And in talking with him, I learned that they actually had a need dealing with the Cold War. Their exhibit was not as fleshed out as they would have liked, and so we discussed creating a virtual exhibit to help build some meat into what they already had there. So we composed a letter to my students, giving an overview of this virtual display and offering them a challenge to connect the Cold War to their home, to Hampton Roads. And so that's kind of where we started in our project. So my students started with creating a need-to-know list. And the need-to-know list not only helped direct them in their research for what they needed to know, but helped give me an idea of what lessons I needed to provide in order to ensure they had not only the content foundation I needed them to have, but to ensure that they would be successful in their projects as well. I also wanted them to feel like they had an opportunity to delve into a part of the Cold War that interested them. And so I had them fill out a survey and try to match their interest with what they told me on the survey. And then we started researching. And research at high school begins with Google. And they were Googling their topics and finding about the Cold War. And as our topics deepened, we invited Mr. Garcia to come connect with us. And he came and made it a point of connecting with every team, offering feedback, sources, insights, and acting as a sounding board for students as they needed him. And what I realized was through this interaction, my students' research became more meaningful and purposeful in what they were doing. And instead of finding whatever the top hit on Google was, they were actually spending time on sources like the CIA website, in which declassified documents are continuously being uploaded. And I found that I was having conversations with students that weren't based on what's going to be on the test and what's the answer going to be, but it was content driven. They wanted to know how the SALT talks interacted with mutually assured destruction and IBM missiles and how that impacted foreign policies of presidents. And so we had moved from a test-driven conversation to a content-driven conversation. And for me, that made the gamble on the project worthwhile. So my students are currently creating wiki pages, and each team has a wiki page that's housed on a homepage. Now my students who are really good at graphic arts, who are working on decorating the homepage to make it more aesthetically pleasing, but these are some of the topics that my students are working on. And then I challenged them once more. I challenged them to take their topic and connect it to Hampton Roads, to bring it home and make it more local. And the students who I brought here tonight are part of that, making the Cold War more local and more pertinent to Hampton Roads. And so they are developing 90-second podcasts that's going to connect to their wiki pages about how their detail is connecting to Hampton Roads. And so Jack has gone from a topic that was the impact of the Cold War in Virginia, and through his research, he has found the Nike Missile Project.
Thank you. The Nike Missile Program was an anti-aircraft defense system created in reaction to the Soviets gaining long-range bombers. There were 8 Nike Ajax missile sites in the Hampton Roads area to defend the port of Norfolk, 3 on our peninsula and 5 in Virginia Beach and around Norfolk. They were first commissioned in 1955, and the last one was decommissioned in 1972. The nuclear-tipped Hercules missile was included in the SALT conferences, which resulted in their retirements, and they were replaced by the Patriot system. This is a picture of the radar tower at our local one at Patrick Henry Airport. And this is a map of a Nike missile site that was converted into a park in the Isle of Wight.
And so Jack had shared with me that he's actually been running on the trails here at Nike Park and never realized why it was called Nike Park. And now he has a better idea of where that is and where it stemmed from. And then I asked Asia and Caitlin to come with me tonight because their project was a little bit different. They've gone from a topic that they weren't exactly thrilled about to one that they've really taken ownership of.
When we were first assigned this project, my group received the broad topic of Nixon and his actions during the Cold War, which we then narrowed down to Vietnamization. Initially, we weren't particularly interested in it. It was a school assignment. We'd turn it in, we'd get a grade back, we'd forget about it in a month. However, once Mr. Garcia came and visited and really talked to us and connected, things started to change. We actually got excited about it. And we further focused our discussion more on the perception of the soldiers returning back and how there was this shift from the apathy to honoring their bravery in the 80s. And how it still impacts how we view the military today. And the fact that something that happened all these years ago when I wasn't here still affects how I view things, it's so amazing how I've gotten this opportunity to really explore that more. And this project has become something that, if it wasn't a website, I'd be really proud to just hang it on my fridge. Unfortunately, technology hasn't advanced that far yet.
Thanks, Caitlin. I definitely agree with you. I believe that talking with Mr. Garcia, getting very involved in this project, has made it become such an interesting topic for us to look into. He's given us insight about sources that we can look at that we've never thought of looking into before. One source in particular, which I received from the Daily Press website, which is an event that took place in the 90s called Vietnam Revisited. And this was an event which honored the military during the Vietnam era, but in current times. So what they did was they commemorated the soldiers, the generals. They brought out weaponry and helicopters that were used during the Vietnam War and showcased it to the public. And Mr. Garcia was able to give us first-time photographs that have never been released before for us to use in our project. And as Caitlin was saying, that these are photos that have never been seen before. They're going to be used in our project, in our website, and people are going to be citing us for this. Now that, I don't know, that's just an amazing accomplishment that I've never been able to say that I've done before. And this project has given me that.
So they've been excited about being able to digitize some of the pictures about NAM Land and the POW parades and those sorts of things that happen in this event. Unfortunately, Mr. Garcia was not able to join us tonight, but our next step in our process is creating QR codes that a team of students and I will be going to the Virginia War Museum to meet with Mr. Garcia and embed within their display on the Cold War. And we plan on having that done by the end of this month. And so that is our Cold War project, and we'd like to thank you for your time and your interest in what we're doing.